This podcast is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. What if comparing car insurance rates was as easy as putting on your favorite podcast? With Progressive, it is. Just visit the Progressive website to quote with all the coverages you want. You'll see Progressive's direct rate, and then their tool will provide options from other companies, so you can compare. All you need to do is choose the rate and coverage you like. Quote today at Progressive.com to join the over 29 million drivers who trust Progressive. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Comparison rates not available in all states or situations. Prices vary based on how you buy.
Hi, I'm Josh Levine. My podcast, The Queen, tells the story of Linda Taylor. She was a con artist, a kidnapper, and maybe even a murderer. She was also given the title the Welfare Queen, and her story was used by Ronald Reagan to justify slashing aid to the poor. Now, it's time to hear her real story. Over the course of 4 episodes, you'll find out what was done to Linda Taylor, what she did to others, and what was done in her name.
The great lesson of this, for me, is that people will come to their own conclusions based on what their prejudices are.
Subscribe to The Queen on Apple Podcasts or wherever you're listening right now.
Just for a moment, I want you to picture the humble avocado. A supermarket staple, sometimes a guilty pleasure. Delicious on a chip, star of the eponymous toast. Mostly, I think of avocados as unavoidable. Slate's Alex Sammon, he gets that. But one of the things he wants you and me to know is that the modern ubiquity of the avocado has been completely engineered.
The rise of the avocado as a fruit is like really one of the great advertising stories of the modern era. The affiliations that we have, like, you know, the notion of like a superfood, which is like a totally made up designation, right? But all of us, I think, like, you know, would say like, oh, that's what an avocado is. That's not even a thing, but
I want to believe, Alex.
Right, of course. And it's like, it's such an interesting backstory because for like 100 years, there was an immense amount of money put into advertising avocados, and they were constantly rebranding them because Americans hated them.
Alex says the first problem turned out to be the avocado's name. Some people called it an aguacate. Others went with alligator pear. Neither of those things seemed to excite customers. Then there was the issue of telling Americans how to eat the thing. In the 1920s, an ad featured a sliced avocado on a china plate, dubbing it the aristocrat of salad fruit. It turns out Americans wanted something a little less delicate.
We sort of saw it in the 90s. In the late 90s, we saw this big push with guacamole, right? And there was this notion that guacamole was like the food that you served at the Super Bowl. And there was a whole series of ad campaigns about this, and there was like a Mr. Avocado or something.
It was actually Mr. Ripe Guy. But yeah, it was a person in an avocado outfit who went on talk shows and showed up in the New York Times.
Yeah, they had a mascot and everything else. And there was a big push, right, to affiliate this with the Super Bowl as a snack food. And they just like hit basically an advertising jackpot.
From 2000 to 2021, avocado consumption tripled in the U.S. These days, celebrities shill for avocados.
Please, avocados taste great on lots of things. See? Avocado toast. We can still make this work.
And Mexico selects...
Beach.
The avocado.
Great pick. Love it. That makes a ton of sense. Rich volcanic soil.
And Alex, he wanted to figure out the truth behind these glossy TV spots.
Grown with love since the beginning of time.
Avocados from Mexico.
They seem like quirky and whatever. The actual production process, the actual growing process, very far from that presentation. You know, the majority, like 9 in 10 avocados in the U.S. come from just one state in Mexico, and they actually come from. It's even more condensed than that. It's just a 100-mile corridor within that state. It's like an area that's like riven with violence. It's experiencing climate and hydrological catastrophe, and there's cartel violence there. You know, it's like the list of issues in this region is actually pretty astounding.
Can a lot of these issues been traced to the avocado itself?
Yeah.
Today on the show, a visit to where your avocados come from. You will not think about your guacamole the same way again. I'm Mary Harris. You're listening to What Next? Stick around. This show is brought to you by Discover. Have you heard about Doublenomics? It's okay if you haven't. It's extremely niche and practiced by Discover. Here's an example. Discover automatically doubles the cash back earned on your credit card at the end of your first year with Cashback Match. That means with Discover, you could turn $150 cash back into $300. It pays to Discover. See terms at discover.com/creditcard. This episode is brought to you by SAP. First, the bad news. SAP Business AI will not help you generate cubist versions of your family's holiday photos, but it will help you understand which supplier is best to help you roll out your plant-based packaging in Southeast Asia, or identify the training your junior project manager needs to rise up the ranks, or automate repetitive tasks while you focus on big innovations. So you can be ready for the next opportunity. Revolutionary technology, real-world results. That's SAP Business AI. While understanding the rise of the avocado starts with a phenomenally successful marketing campaign, Alex Sammon says it does not end there. The avocado's rise is also tied up with Mexican dominance of avocado farming. You see, avocados are thirsty, and in the western Mexican state of Michoacan, water is plentiful. 1994's North American Free Trade Agreement set the stage for the avocado gold rush that came next.
Avocados were actually not part of the free trade corridor. They're like one of the only things that was not part of it. But then by 1997, the avocado industry in California was basically destroyed by the price of water. Like California, in a period of drought, water price is extremely expensive. Like this is a very familiar situation in California. And so avocados were only then added to the free trade agreement. And so sort of after a blanket import ban that had been in place for 85 years, there was an agreement that avocados would be imported to the U.S. from Mexico, only from the state of Michoacan, so only from one state. But that's what really blew the door open. And after that, we saw American consumption of avocados basically exploding year over year, really without stopping up until current day. Like that trend line has continued to go up and up and up basically ever since.
When did farming avocados in Mexico become a problem?
That is a good question. I would say in some sense, it's sort of ideal. It's like the climate is cold because it's mountainous. It's highlands, which is what you want for growing avocados. There's this volcanic soil, which is very rich in nutrients. And then there's this incredible abundance of water. And the idea was like, no irrigation, just let it happen. Very quickly, it became clear that that was not going to be how it actually endured. The growers realized that they could actually turn out 4 crops a year from this region, which is, a lot more than they were growing in California, which means a lot more water. And
so that's like year-round avocados.
Yeah, nonstop. These massive native pine forests that were growing in this mountainous region, they quickly and very illegally were felled all sorts of ways. So you had this sort of clear cutting of these forests to make way for the trees.
The avocado trees.
Yeah. Avocado trees, which, a very different type of tree. Like a pine tree does a lot of things differently, but, it gives off aerosols, which helps seed clouds, which helps bring rain. It has this different root system that helps replenish groundwater. The roots are much deeper. Avocado trees don't do any of that. And so all of a sudden the groundwater starts disappearing because the avocados are taking so much of that. The rain is diminished because the hydrological cycle is interrupted and you have climate change issues. The lakes are drying up because, they're of course doing a ton of irrigation, trying to redirect water to these incredibly intensive farms that are being planted. So in like a handful of years, it goes from being this bounty of water resources to an area that has had no earthquakes, is having seismic activities, thousands of registered seismic activities and sinkholes, just because the groundwater has been depleted so quickly that the ground is collapsing.
Hold it, avocados are causing earthquakes?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, sinkholes and earthquakes and the ground is caving in beneath these farms because that's how fast the water has disappeared.
In addition to these environmental issues, which sound very extreme, there's violence now in this region associated with the avocado industry. How has that happened? Like, why has that happened? I just don't think of cartels as associated with avocados.
Right. Yeah. That's there's not a Netflix series about that yet. It's a very lucrative trade and it's local. Once you realize you can make a lot of legitimate above board money in this industry, it sort of was inevitable that I think that you would see cartel involvement, especially in a place where, the state has sort of been weak and unable to enforce a lot of rules. I mean, a lot of these avocado farms themselves are ultimately not legal either. Like there's illegal logging that goes into clearing the pine forests out, and then, the use of irrigation techniques that are not technically legal. And then, of course, right, control over, the farms. I mean, some of it's as simple as just, you pay the cartels for protection if you own a farm. And some of it is, they invest in setting up new ones, and then when those things are exported, they make money off of it. I think it's well known, but I think also the nature of the violence that results in it is pretty extreme.
Like what?
In 2019, there was an incident where 19 people were killed. They were left hanging from a highway overpass. Their bodies were left hanging from this highway overpass, and then also piled underneath a bridge that was understood by Mexican authorities to be the result of some dispute over who controlled basically the export of the fruit from one of these farms. There are constant kidnappings of environmentalists, of government employees, inspectors, even the USDA inspectors who verify the fruit for export quality down there have been carjacked, have been threatened. It's sort of nonstop, actually.
I read that the Mexican government, like environmental officials, they called on the U.S. to get involved here because the U.S. is a major consumer of all these avocados. And they basically thought, you can do something simple like not allow avocados grown on deforested lands to enter the U.S. market. Has the U.S. done anything like that here?
There have been some brief moments. There was a time in early 22 when there was a credible threat made on the USDA inspection operation there, and they froze imports until they deemed it to be safe. So I think there was like a handful of days where there were no avocados allowed to be imported to the U.S. There have been moments like that intermittently over the last couple of years, but they're not environmental assessments, certainly not. They're not being made about concern for the state of the forest or of the water system there. Mostly it's been when the people who have to inspect this stuff to make sure it's safe for consumption are under such great threat of violence that they can't do their jobs. That's when it stops. But beyond that, no.
Why hasn't the Mexican government stepped in to do something about all this?
Well, if you've got a real money-making thing going on, it's hard to be like, this has all got to stop. And, I think that there's a low-level municipal corruption story here, which is probably very common. So, especially in a poorer region, like, slay the golden goose, like probably not. And if you do, the cartels have already shown an incredible willingness, right, to use violence to ensure that wouldn't happen. So there's been talk about doing stuff. I think there's a lot of very acute concern right now about water.
Yeah, I was going to say, I understand why you wouldn't want to kill this huge export for your country, but if you're running out of water, that creates a little pressure.
Right. Absolutely. Right. And it's like not everyone works in the avocado industry in this state, right? Like there are like fishermen and people who grow other things and like people who just, drink water because that's what humans do to live. All that stuff is under incredible pressure right now. And actually there's been a lot of creativity, I think, in terms of coming up with some out of the box solutions to this. But, I think with every passing day is more and more of a concern.
After the break, inside a creative solution to all the problems that come with avocados. This episode is brought to you by SAP. First, the bad news. SAP Business AI will not help you generate cubist versions of your family's holiday photos, but it will help you understand which supplier is best to help you roll out your plant-based packaging in Southeast Asia, or identify the training your junior project manager needs to rise up the ranks, or automate repetitive tasks while you focus on big innovations. So you can be ready for the next opportunity. Revolutionary technology, real-world results. That's SAP Business AI. This show is brought to you by Discover. Have you heard about Doublenomics? It's okay if you haven't. It's extremely niche and practiced by Discover. Here's an example. Discover automatically doubles the cash back earned on your credit card at the end of your first year with Cashback Match. That means with Discover, you could turn $150 cash back into $300. It pays to Discover. See terms at discover.com/creditcard. You wanted to get to know a community that was trying to fix the problems avocados are causing in Mexico. Can you tell me about your trip to this town of Schwartz? Like, what had they done?
Yeah. So Schwartz is, I thought, was an incredibly fascinating place. It's a town right in the heart of the avocado belt there. It's about 20,000 people. It's a largely indigenous population of Purépecha people who, speak that language, who, still dress and engage in these pre-Spanish cultural forms. And they were concerned, shall we say, very concerned about the environmental impacts just broadly. And so in 2011, they were beset by illegal loggers. There were a bunch of loggers that were logging the pine forest in the hills above Chiron.
And do the loggers come in like before the avocados? Like they get rid of the trees and then, oh, there's room for avocados here.
That's exactly how it happens. And actually in this specific instance was exactly how it was going to happen. So these loggers basically made an agreement with the mayor. It was sort of a corrupt backroom deal. They could log parts of the forest in the hills there. They would sell the wood. They would use the money to pay for avocado saplings, basically. That was the plan. The townspeople obviously were outraged by this plan. And when they saw the logging that was going on, they were incredibly concerned because it happened to be going down right next to this freshwater spring that supplied the majority of the water for the town at that point. And they felt like it was an acute threat to life in the town. And so they had an uprising. Like one morning, it was April of 2011, they basically took these loggers hostage. They burned their trucks. They shut down the town. So they basically barricaded the borders of the town, and they threw the mayor out. And they actually engaged in a pretty radical political experiment where they tore up the town's constitution and decided to rewrite a new charter where environmental concerns would be front and center. And it was a sort of democratic structure. They created this town council with 12 members, and then they made a bunch of environmental commitments that were, top of the list was avocados are illegal. You could not grow them.
Okay, how was the town able to do this, like practically? I'm just thinking like if someone in the United States was like, okay, we're going to take over this town and no more avocados or tomatoes or whatever, you couldn't do that? Why was this town able to?
Right. In the Mexican Constitution, very interesting, there is a protocol which states that indigenous communities are allowed, if they can prove that they are have existed continuously over a period of time, they're allowed to secede from the state of Mexico and they can establish their own autonomous communities. And so that's exactly what Chiron did.
That seems so extreme, like banning a whole plant. How do you even enforce that?
Right. Well, interestingly, the enforcement mechanism is also, some might say, a little extreme, which is that they chartered this militia force to ensure that was not happening. So there are over 100 members, and at any given time, they're patrolling. We're talking about areas that are hard to see sometimes, up in the mountains, in densely packed forests. They're patrolling at all times to ensure that there is no illegal logging, that the water resources of this region are not threatened, and that there are no avocados being planted. And they're doing so, they're carrying around AR-15s and pistols, and they're wearing flak jackets and helmets. Like, this looks like a military force, and it is.
Yeah, you said getting into this town, like, it's not like you could just walk in. Like, you had to get past the checkpoint.
Right. They're not taking it lightly. And, I had arranged to visit ahead of time, obviously. I had spoken with the town council to ensure that my presence would be welcome, and I explained what I wanted to do there in this reporting project. And even with that all lined up, when I got there, cell phone service was down, and I pulled up to the checkpoint, and of course, there's a guy with an AR-15 and in fatigues, and stops the car, and he was not going to let me through. Like, there was no until we really made contact with the representative of the town council that we were welcome and that they knew what we were doing, and that we weren't affiliated with any malevolent industrial forces. Only then were we even allowed to enter the premises of the town.
You went out on patrol in this town just to see, like, what does it look like when this small militarized force goes out and, like, looks for avocados or any sign that avocados might be about to appear. What did you see when you did that?
Yeah, I got in one of the patrol cars with one of the most heavily armed units, and we drove around, I think, for 10 or 15 minutes before they got a call that they actually had to go make a confrontation, that there was some illegal logging going on in their estimation on the southwest side of the town, and they were like, we have to go confront them immediately. And to me, that was like, all right, great, well, let's go do it. And to them, they were like, there's absolutely no way we can ensure your safety in the situation. Like, we are all armed, we are wearing bulletproof vests. Like, you are just here.
You're just a guy. Sorry.
Yeah, exactly. They were like, we can't assure your safety in the situation, so you can't come to this. But it was like that. It was like, a matter of minutes, and there was already, an issue, and it went on hold for a couple hours, my tour of duty. And then after that, once that was settled, and it was only sort of temporarily settled, but settled for the day at least, then they took me around and we went to the sort of flashpoints on the border, various sort of borderlands where you can see, I mean, it was pretty amazing. You can see the avocado industry encroaching from all sides.
Was there literally like a border? Like, you were standing on one side, it's a pine forest, and the other side, it's like an avocado farm? Exactly.
Yep. And in certain areas, yes. In other areas, in fact, one of the areas they took me to, there's no walls or, there were some barbed wire. There's some barbed wire fencing. That was sort of the biggest obstacle that you could erect out there. And these avocado growers in one area had cut down all the pine trees. There's a very distinctive line where you could see where they stop, and then they set fire to the remaining vegetation. And of course, there's nothing to stop that fire from burning out of control, and it leapt across the little barbed wire line there and burned into the pine forest of Chiron. So as much as they had fought to sort of maintain this line, it's a constant battle.
Yeah, it's a good point that, like, all these places are connected. Like, even the trees, like, underground, the root systems are connected,
Right.
So it's like you can carve out your own space, but really, it must be difficult to actually separate from what the avocados are doing.
Right, totally. At the end of this patrol, we stopped by the freshwater spring that had been the great concern, and during the initial uprising, the water there had slowed to a trickle. I mean, even to call it a trickle would be probably generous. And they had, they diversified their water resources. They do a lot of water recycling and rainwater collection and all this stuff. So the town is less reliant on this spring for survival. But the appearance of these avocado orchards on all sides were pretty clearly draining that water off, and to the point that, like, this spring had almost entirely run dry despite these incredible efforts to protect it.
Have other towns followed Chiron's model here?
Yeah, they have. And this is a real point of pride, too, that there were 26 other towns in the region who had adopted this model, which, we're talking about pretty small towns here. Chiron would be the largest in terms of population, but yeah, 26, pretty widespread. And the proof of concept of Chiron, I think, was really inspiring for a lot of other towns in this region.
This all just seems dangerous. It just seems like a bunch of people with guns, like, wanting to make money. It just seems like a tinderbox.
Oh, totally. I mean, absolutely. And that's the other thing is, if a couple guys in a truck show up and start laying a pipeline for to take your water somewhere else, it's like you can show up with more guns and more people, and you can run them off. But then you don't know who paid them, and when they come back, who do they come back with? So it's also a precarious, also a paranoid, also a very scary way of living, I think.
It doesn't seem like avocado demand is going anywhere anytime soon. As someone who, like, goes to Trader Joe's occasionally, like, I see the avocados. I see the people buying them. A lot of times that people is me. Are there any solutions to what's happening here? Other than, like, closing off the avocado industry entirely with guns and fencing off your community the way Sharon has?
I think that just having less is not a great selling point. It's certainly a very good political slogan. And we don't really like to talk about that as one of the solutions to the climate crisis, is that maybe we should just consume less. And I think with avocados, it maybe is just that, like, avocados shouldn't be eaten by everyone every day. Like, maybe they shouldn't be like a menu item at the biggest fast food chains in the world. And maybe they are like something for special occasions. Or I think if we had a real sense of what went into making them, how much water and everything else, I think that we would have to say that they're probably undervalued at their current price point. Even if we do think that that price point is high, you know, it's great to eat them. It's totally fine, but maybe everyone should just be eating a little less.
Alex, I'm really grateful for your time. Thanks for coming on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Always a treat.
Alex Sammon is a politics writer here at Slate. He's also an erstwhile avocado correspondent. His story about Sharon's avocado experiment was published over at Harper's. And that's the show. What Next is produced by Paige Osburn, Elena Schwartz, Rob Gunther, Madeline Ducharme, and Anna Phillips. We are led by Alicia Montgomery with a little boost from Susan Matthews. Ben Richmond is the Senior Director of Podcast Operations here at Slate. And I'm Mary Harris. Thanks for listening. Catch you back here next time.
This is the story of the one. As head of maintenance at a concert hall, he knows the show must always go on. That's why he works behind the scenes, ensuring every light is working, the HVAC is humming, and his facility shines. With Grainger's supplies and solutions for every challenge he faces, plus 24/7 customer support, his venue never misses a beat. Call quickgrainger.com or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.